Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of A Bizarre and Unusual World. Today I'm back with another very interesting topic, at least I find it to be interesting, and it definitely fits in with the bizarre or unusual topics. In today's episode I will be going over the lost Roanoke colony. As usual, I will be going over the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the Roanoke colony. So let's go ahead and start with the what. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Roanoke colony, let's just go over the basics of what it is. Essentially, the Roanoke colony, or the Lost Colony, was an English settlement that disappeared without a trace. They just vanished. And to this day, we still do not know for sure what happened to this lost colony. Sure, there are plenty of theories and ideas of what happened to Roanoke, but for sure, we have no idea, and it remains an American mystery of what happened to the Roanoke colony. As for the when, this took place in 1587 to 1590. And as for the where, this took place on Roanoke Island, which in present day is off the coast of North Carolina. So who is the colony? As I said, they were an English colony, and they were led by a man named John White. He was the governor of this colony, the leader, an explorer, and even an artist. So in May 1587, the colony set sail for Roanoke Island, and they would arrive July 1587. So as soon as they made it to the island, they did start to create their settlement, build their village, and so on. They did have some conflicts with the local Native American tribes, and that mostly came from a previous colony that had tried to settle there. They had not been kind to the Native Americans and already created that tension. So there was a few attacks as they settled in, because the Native American tribes were used to the colony before that had really treated them so horribly. So just a month later, in August of 1587, John White actually headed back to England. The settlement really wanted him to go back for more supplies, food, weapons, tools, and even more people to bring back to Roanoke Island. So White left the colony, which included about 115 settlers. That was including men, women, and children, even John White's daughter and his newborn granddaughter. She was actually the first English-born in America. Now, the crappy part of his plan to return to England was the timing. Right as he left for that journey, England and Spain began a war. So once he got back to England, every available ship was sent in to fight or into the war, and he had no way to get back to Roanoke Island. John White was not able to go back to the colony until August of 1590. That's 3 years later. Now, he did attempt to try and go back during that time period with smaller ships, but it never worked out because of weather or other various things, so it did take him 3 years to get back to the Roanoke colony. When he finally made it back to the colony, he found no one. Everyone had just disappeared. White didn't find any bodies or signs of death in the area. There wasn't even any signs of a battle or a struggle of any kind. The only thing he did find was the word Croatoan carved into a fence post, and the letters C-R-O carved into a nearby tree. White had instructed the colony to carve crosses into the trees if for some reason they had to leave the village or if they were forced out, but no crosses were ever found, only the word Croatoan and the C-R-O. So having no idea what happened to the colony or his own family, John White actually sailed south to what was known as the Croatoan Islands, which would make sense because that's the word that they left for him. Today, that is known as what I believe is the Hatteras Island. But once again, it was unfortunate timing on his part. Both times they tried to sail south to the Croatoan Islands. The weather would not permit it. It was too stormy. And after the second try, they headed home to England. So John White left the colony, having no idea what happened to the people. He went back to England, eventually moved to Ireland, where he died. He never found out what happened to his loved ones or where the lost colony went. There was a bit of a search for the colonists in 1602, but weather didn't allow them to actually make it to the island. And then once again, another mission in 1603. They had intended to land on Chesapeake Bay. They didn't quite make it there. Weather kind of put them off a little bit, but they were near the location. Part of this group was killed by Native Americans, and the other part was forced to return to England with no answers as to what happened to the Roanoke colony. No bodies or signs of a mass grave have ever been found. This colony just simply vanished and is still quite the mystery today. So let's move on to the why of the Roanoke colony. Why did these people disappear? So for this section, I'll be sharing a couple different popular theories on what happened to the lost colony. So one popular theory is that the local Native American tribes just killed the lost colony. There was already massive tension between them and the settlers, especially the previous colony. They had been a bunch of assholes to them. So the tension could explain why they were murdered off. However, there were no bodies found, so maybe they burned the bodies, or did they scatter them in the sea? There wasn't a mass grave. Going along with that theory, there is the idea that Spanish troops actually killed the colony. They stumbled across the Roanoke colony, and because England and Spain were in a war, they killed off the settlers, or they took these settlers. Another theory is that the colony actually joined in with a Native American tribe, whether that was friendly or maybe even as slaves, depending on the tension between the different tribes, of course. That would kind of suggest that they did in fact join the Croatoan tribe, since that's the word that they left for John White, or at least what they thought was the Croatoan tribe, because there could have been miscommunication, of course. There are supposedly signs of European influence in some of those tribe locations after their disappearance. Things like stone-built houses or tools or items that have a European influence on them, more of how Europeans made them instead of how Native Americans made them. And in 2015, archaeologists did go to the Hatteras Island, which is where the Croatoan tribe lived, and they found a variety of objects that have European origin. Things like bowls, tools, the end of swords, things like that had the European influence. In 1888, there was a group of Croatoan Native Americans that claimed to be the last remnant of this lost white colony, and people suggested that there was white blood within the bloodlines of those specific Native Americans. And some people even claim that today, going back through their family history and so on. However, DNA analysis has been inconclusive. They can't quite determine if any of these modern-day Native Americans have any ties or DNA that relates back to the Roanoke colony. Then we have the theory of zombies! Yes, Roanoke zombies. Was Roanoke Island the first sighting of a zombie apocalypse? But because it was an island, it was just contained to that little area? No bodies to find if the zombies ate them. Or there's the idea of like the regular cannibalism, not quite a zombie virus, but that they just resorted to cannibal means. They were waiting for John White to come back with a variety of supplies, and it took him 3 years. So did they resort to cannibalism? Yuck. Plenty of colonies have record of cannibalism in their history, so Roanoke would really be no different. So did they eat their friends out of existence? Or here's a thought that some Native Americans believe. Perhaps some of the colonists still exist, but they were taken over by an ancient Native American legend called the Wendigo. It was believed that if humans resorted to cannibalism, they would turn into this terrifying beast known as the Wendigo. So we also have the idea of an illness hitting the island, something like a plague that could have killed off a number of the settlers, drove them crazy, which would kind of go along with some reports. Some Native American tribes say that they have history or reports that they witnessed the Roanoke tribe kind of going crazy against each other. However, this theory wouldn't explain the lack of bodies and the lack of any proof that there was a battle or that anything went crazy on the island. They just disappeared. There was no evidence. Let's see, we also have the theory that the settlers moved inland. So as I had mentioned, John White was actually a bit of an artist, and he created a map of the area, an actually very impressive map for the time. How they actually knew how accurate not just the island, but the whole coast of North Carolina was is extremely impressive. But anyway, this map is said to potentially hold hidden things, hidden secrets, things of that nature. So in 2012, they actually did a further examination of this map. They used things like x-rays, more modern technology with lights to see in between the map and things like that. And they actually found that on a piece of the map, something had been covered up inland. Not only had it been covered up, but it potentially used like a form of like invisible ink. I know that sounds like it's from a movie, but like they would use it, and you have to use heat or lemon juice to reveal its secrets. So that's kind of why people think that John White was hiding secrets on this map. But inland, underneath that hidden piece, was a blue star, and some people think that this was the site of another fort where the Roanoke colony could have moved inland. But why were they hiding this fact? Why did John White cover it up and then use invisible ink? Were they hiding it from the Queen or others back in England? If they did move inland, why the big secret? Like, who were they hiding from? Or were the settlers hiding from John White? What's the story there? In modern day, archaeologists have examined that potential area, and while they have found like signs of European tools, bowls, things like that, they can't exactly pinpoint that it's the correct time period for when the Roanoke colony actually disappeared. There are some other smaller theories, like the Roanoke colony was sabotaged to prove a point to the Queen or other higher-up people in England at the time. Or perhaps with a lack of supplies, the colonists actually tried to sail back to England. There has never been any ship or shipwreck discovered, but let's be honest, the ocean is a very big place. It's always possible that they just sank and never to be found. Or they could have even ended up someplace else. If weather was such a big deal back then, they could have ended up someplace that wasn't England and started their life over there. We also have the supernatural theories, of course, which I always get into. I mentioned the Wendigo, but there's also some theories that kind of relate to witchcraft, like potentially the Native American tribes suggested these dodgy outsiders of weird, dark witchcraft, so they had them executed. Or maybe they weren't killed for witchcraft, but did real-life witches find them in North Carolina? Is there dark magic hiding within the wilderness? Did they use their black magic to harm or make the entire colony disappear? You'll find that witchcraft pops up in a lot of history, but you'll also find that most of the time it's someone that was innocent that was falsely accused. Other smaller supernatural theories suggest like the colonists turned into trees by a spirit that was on Roanoke Island. Okay. Or that the whole colony was possessed by a reptilian demon that lived in the area. I don't know. These are the theories. Or some people actually believe that the Roanoke colony was the sign of a massive alien abduction. This would explain why they vanished. There's no sign of them, there's no bodies, there's no nothing. Aliens just came and picked up this Roanoke colony, took them back to wherever they're from, and then people relate that back to John White's map, that perhaps the blue star that was inland from the island wasn't a fort, but that was the alien ship that those settlers had witnessed. It's crazy thoughts. It's crazy. Did they get abducted by aliens? It's a very interesting thought. So how is this debated today? Roanoke, or the Lost Colony, has been featured in so many different storylines, movies, TV shows. It's a very popular topic for this generation, it seems. American Horror Story did an entire season that was inspired by the Lost Colony.
My Roanoke Nightmare, a true American horror story.
Also, the show Sleepy Hollow gave a supernatural explanation on why the colony disappeared.
We still haven't found them.
Perhaps because they've relocated to Sleepy Hollow.
When they reach Roanoke, they realize it is a whole big colony filled with people.
Storylines relating to it have also been featured on the show Haven and Supernatural. And those are just the shows that I watch. I'm sure there's about a million other shows or movies that have featured Roanoke or gave an explanation as to what happened to these lost people. Besides that, conspiracy theorists still to this day debate what happened to the lost colony, and they also reference that the word Croatoan has popped up in a lot of different history. Other colonies, other weird things, even relates to Edgar Allan Poe's death. Croatoan was said to be one of the last words he said. So it's very interesting, like, what is the true meaning of Croatoan? And as I said, today archaeologists are still doing digs of the island, of other locations. Scientists are also looking into that DNA evidence to find if there is any trace of like the Roanoke colony in anyone's DNA, and then tracing their family, things like that. We're trying to use modern technology to explain what happened to the lost colony. It's just all very, very interesting, and everyone usually has their opinion of what happened to the colony or their theory. It's just a very interesting mystery. I personally tend to bounce around with different theories because I think some of them are very fascinating. Like the alien abduction. Like, I mean, that would explain it. Oh, they just disappeared because the aliens took them away. Or, you know, the simple thing of just moving to the Croatoan Islands, moving in with the Native Americans, or they could have just died off or moved inland and then died off. You know, there's just so many different theories and ideas on what happened to this people, and I think it's safe to say we're never gonna know because it happened so long ago. Are we really ever going to have like a definite answer on what happened to these people? I highly doubt it. But I would love to hear what you guys think of Roanoke, the lost colony. Do you have a theory that you tend to gravitate towards? Did you hear about this in school? I did. I learned about this in school, but it's kind of, as American Horror Story did it and other TV shows and movies, it's kind of peaked in popularity again. As always, if you did enjoy this episode or you learned something new about the Roanoke colony, be sure to give me a big like. It lets me know that you're enjoying this series. And of course, subscribe for future episodes. I have a big long list of your guys' suggestions of topics I want to cover, all of the bizarre and unusual topics in our world. Thanks so much for watching, lovelies, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!